the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmidt_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmidt.
Welcome to it. Great to be with you on a Monday. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Hope your weekend was good. We're counting down to kick off and excited to be with you for the next 2 hours. We'll spend time with College Football Insider with USA Today. Paul Myerberg, get his take on the title race and where's Nebraska at on his radar. The AP out. Nebraska getting at least a vote in the top 25. We'll discuss that. How did the scrimmage go yesterday? Our eyes and ears are everywhere, my friend. So we'll tell you what we've heard and maybe what some people saw. That's coming up. And in hour 2, 1 hour from now, Mr. Blackshirt himself, Charlie McBride, will be with us. Plenty of room for you today. And can get involved at 466-3776, 466-3776, 800-825-5865. Phone numbers to get in. Can email the show, Chris at hailvarsity.com. We are streaming live on ESPN Lincoln on Facebook, ESPN Lincoln's Facebook, at ESPN Lincoln's Twitter handle. So can communicate that way. Give us a follow at Schmidt_radio. Chris Schmidt, that's me. Elijah Herbel at Herbal Essence for Elijah. And follow the show for all the happenings going on at H Varsity Radio. Good crossover with our dear friend Nick in Austin on the Nick Handley show a little bit ago. So we are geared up, ready to go. And not a bad second scrimmage, a telling scrimmage, Elijah, and a second chance to make another impression, first impression, or kind of validate some early thoughts or reaction to the original scrimmage that was just a weekend ago. So there's some good news coming out, and that's fair, but not a ton different than what we had heard from the last scrimmage, Elijah, and that is the defense looks good. And our dear friend Searles says, not yesterday, but just overall, he talked with us on Thursday of last week, just that the offensive line is still a bit shaky. And we'll spend time with Coach McBride on this in about an hour. But it needs to get to the point at some point in the year, you can be shaky going into week 1. You can work through the shakiness. And by Oklahoma or after, you need to get refined. Got to figure out some answers to those questions. I'm real anxious to hit a couple of sound bites from Scott Frost from Saturday. But that, to me, is just, we talk about it, but it's going to be the tale of the season. Is where does the offensive line start? Where does it finish? What type of growth and health do they maintain with a health standpoint as the years go on, as the season goes on? Because, you know, we can do the math each month of the season on what best case, worst case, and reality is for Nebraska in 3 separate month-long seasons, right? Where you get September, you get October, you get November. So there's that. The offensive line still work to do, and you'll have to adjust accordingly based on what you're able to do on the offensive line.
Yeah, it's going to be about how can Nebraska, find their Achilles heel? Well, what part of the offensive line? I think we all expect if there's any part of the team this year that's going to be the Achilles heel, it is the offensive line. So you figure out what about your offensive line is the Achilles heel through fall camp. And then as you get ramping up through game prep, you're going to try to find ways to hide that. There are ways to hide most of your Achilles heels in the football field. I mean, Ohio State, they had issues protecting the passer last season. And for 11 games they played last year, they were able to cover up that Achilles heel through a good run game with Travion Henderson and just having incredible wide receivers that were running quick little routes, getting open, and they didn't have to make CJ Stroud stand in the pocket for forever last season. That's how Ohio State covered that up. The only team that was really able to exploit that was Michigan, and you saw what happened in that Michigan game last season. So Nebraska, I mean, every football team out there is going to have an Achilles heel. With Nebraska, we can all assume it's going to be the offensive line. I think the question moving forward is not necessarily how much better can this offensive line get, because you can only take so many strides within a fall camp and within a season, but it's a question of how can the coaching staff, while developing that offense line, find a way to cover up that Achilles heel until a point where you don't have to do that anymore.
Well, you got to adjust and adapt.
Yeah.
Right? You just flat out got to do it. So lean on your run game. Anthony Grant sounds and looks like he's going to be the go-to, at least to start the year. I know Gabe Irvin has had a good camp, but still some tenderness in that knee. You still have Ramir Johnson. You still have Yant. You've got a couple of freshmen that you can lean on. You've got a really good position coach that are getting his running backs up to speed and ready to help complement that offensive line. Ramir Johnson can be a weapon in the short passing game, lined up in the slot out of the backfield. O'Shawn Mathis continues to do things per how the scrimmage went yesterday. And from a specialist standpoint, that's worth points in your favor. If you can get good field goal kicking and good punting, that is boring. But, man, I'll take a lot of boring this year with where Nebraska's been versus where they can be, thanks to Bill Bush. And you also have Janarian Bonner, another Louisiana target, 6 foot plus, a guy that is physically impressive. And to be honest here, Saturday, make that Sunday scrimmage, didn't see an extended period of starters, just a couple of different series. You saw which maybe you needed to see and wanted to see. That first scrimmage, all right, what's your 2s and 3s look like? Were those guys able to get work, build some depth, and then get some confidence and go forward? Really interesting story this weekend. It might have been towards the end of the week out of the Journal-Star. And it's fascinating, and Amy Just did a nice job with it. But she was able to kind of get down to the nitty-gritty on Casey Thompson, right? And just what's up with his thumb. Well, what was up with his thumb, we'll hit into that a little bit more. But I want to go a little bit further on the offensive line, Elijah. And this was a comment that kind of struck me from Saturday. And we'll start off here from Frost here when it comes to the offensive line. He was asked about it. This goes back to Saturday, but it was pre-scrimmage. And he had some comments, and that got my mind kind of wandering a little bit here with the offensive line and what's best case for it.
It's good. I got to tell you, they're working harder than I've ever seen them work. That's my opinion. That we put a lot of science into this with the NAPL lab and with Zach, and the guys wear monitors that track overall output and then 100 other statistics, and they're more than doubling in a lot of cases the amount of effort that they put out the last couple of years in practice. A lot has to do with the type of kids we have, and a lot has to do with Donnie and Aaron working with them. They're doing an unbelievable job, and I've been pleased with the way they're playing.
So, question was asked to Coach Frost, why the heck's your O-line tired?
No, more movement, more coming off the ball, more effort, and their indies are tough. Sometimes I get a little frustrated during team because the linemen are dog tired by the time they get to our team drills. So we'll probably have to curtail that as we get into season a little bit, but the work that they've gotten done is extraordinary in camp.
The dreaded individual drills. Elijah, you are grinning a bit sheepishly, and you do enough individual drills, you hate them, but it really kind of makes you a man. Fair to say?
Hate's a strong word. Hate's a strong word.
Well, if you dominate the individuals, you love them.
It's, to me,
it's a necessary evil.
Necessary evil. It's almost like if you grew up playing sports, you didn't necessarily love going to practice. There were enjoyable moments from practice, but you practiced so you could get to Sunday, so you go play the game. And that's how I kind of feel about, it's how I felt about those individual drills. It's the thing you got to go do. Yeah, you're going to be tired afterwards, especially in the summer heat. You're not going to enjoy it, but it's how you get to that team period, which is the fun period where you actually don't move the football instead of just push this guy and then come back 5 yards and do it all over again. But the iron sharpens iron is what you always hear those coaches saying. And whenever you get the individual work from those offensive linemen, you hear how tired they are. It's because iron sharpening iron, and ones against ones, all that stuff you hear in camp is what's going to make this offensive line not only prepared for this season, but it's what's going to make them improve incrementally practice after practice. So,
well, and if you win your individual drill all the time, you bat 50%. That's really good, because you'll do some one-on-one pass pro versus pass rush.
mm-hmm.
And you're trying to, if you're the defensive lineman, go throw the fat guy out of the way and go kill the quarterback. If you're the heavier guy, you're trying to just punch away at that beast that's electrically quick off the edge. Last thought here from Frost on the offensive line on what Coach Raiola's done and what he's brought with him from an individual drill standpoint.
No, it's all him. And again, we have a GA working there that does a great job too, Aaron Cooling. And when I went out interviewing people, I wanted to find somebody that felt the same way I did about the mentality and technique. And Donnie knows it better than I do, but I loved what he taught, and it's coming to fruition now.
So what's happening with those individual drills? And you've got the linemen carrying their blocks several yards downfield, and it's quite a bit of repetition. That's where a lot of the energy is being exerted, because you have those GPS trackers, and you heard Scott's initial comments. And if you're a Nebraska fan and you're like, okay, cool, you're doing it now, but why did you just start doing it now? Because the offensive line's been an issue since 18, okay? And you have more effort. You got consistency that's being created, or at least preached, and you're trying to create trust with the rest of the guys on that line. So, and Elijah, it's fair to me, if I'm Cam Jurgens and I looked around the line last year or 2 years ago, the line could look at Cam Jurgens, God bless him. You trust that things are going to work. Can you consistently do it for a long drive? And you got this philosophical shift, and you need it in the Big Ten to take care of the football. Don't turn it over. Eat the clock. Wail away on the opposing defense and see who screams uncle first. What used to win national championships. And that is the tactic that they're trying to get guys ready for Dublin and beyond. When you play Oklahoma, and specifically for November, when it's Iowa, when it's Wisconsin, when it's Minnesota, when it's Michigan, all consecutively. And then, that middle stretch in October against the Purdues and against the Rutgers and against some of the other squads, the Illinois and the Indianas, who you haven't fared well against. And Nebraska used to be the toughest dude on the field, and it's not been the case for quite a while. So you have to lean on the offensive line play. And Scott ended up talking a little bit here. He was asked this question as to why did it take you so long to make some changes? This was in reference to special teams, but you can ask the question about the offensive line coach as well.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about that, Sam. I have too much respect for people that were here before that are great coaches. This just fits what I believe in better. That's a big difference too. I mean, I talk about the O-line. When you got good running backs, they make O-lines look good. And we're definitely better in the running back room because of the kids in there and the coach. And, we're throwing the ball downfield maybe a little more, and that backs people up and makes things look better. So, you can't point to one player or one coach or one group. I'm just pleased with the progress that I see.
Well, there were several coaches or groups that you can point to that just – and listen, you had a chasm between Greg Austin and Scott Frost. Okay. You just did. Greg's a good football coach. Greg's developed 3 guys that are in the NFL right now. Greg turned down the Bills in Ohio State. So I just think it was difference in philosophy. and you bring in Raiola. That's the good news is you found somebody that is going to do what you want, and you have a guy now that's going to be hammering away at those big guys to create a physical offensive line. I don't know that Raiola is real concerned about being their friend or even well-liked, but he'll be respected and he'll get a different approach out of him. And I think different's got to be better than what was.
He's trying to create some nasty. I think that's a topic we hit on this show 2 weeks ago, maybe. That's what that blocking through the whistle, finishing your blocks. That's what all that is it's being nasty on the football field. And when you hear about Raiola trying to fire these guys up and making sure they're going hard through individual, it's trying to develop that nasty, a chip on your shoulder mentality from the offensive line that I don't think we have seen here. And part of that maybe comes from Greg Austin's zone blocking scheme a little more, where you're trying to just get yourself in between the ball carrier and the defensive lineman. Not saying you can't be nasty with the zone blocking scheme, but that's a little bit of what Raiola's system is going to bring. It's that nasty, that finishing through the play.
Well, a guy, when I think of nasty lineman, guy who really went hard all the time was Slauson and or Incognito.
Yeah, I say love him or hate him. I think of Richie Incognito.
For sure. Paul Myerberg going to join us, get his thoughts on the college football season, his takeaways on Nebraska. Hail Varsity continues on a Monday, presented by the Nebraska.
And we're back
Fellas, listen
on Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Yes, that's awesome.
Thanks for spending time at Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery, getting ready for Nebraska Northwestern in Ireland and the AP out with their top 25. We welcome in college football writer and insider with USA Today, Paul Myerberg, with us. Paul, it's been a while, man. How we doing?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks for having me back. We're like one full weekend away from college football, so we're feeling good.
I know, yeah. I hear the excitement in your voice, and week zeros are great for you, for me, for the fans, and that means Nebraska and Western got to get figured out. Nebraska played a week zero last year against Illinois. Before we get into the Big Red, Paul, I want to get your takeaway here with ho-hum, another AP top 25 preseason poll. And, guess what? Alabama's number one again. It's just death taxes in Bama, isn't it?
Yeah, and what's so sad is that Texas didn't even get in the top 25, let alone get a first-place vote like they did in the coaches poll.
No.
So that was really, I'm sure we are all just devastated. Yeah, there's, it's funny that, things come in threes. Football right now, you got programs that have really placed themselves a distance ahead of 4 through 6, let alone 15 through 25. That's Bama, Ohio State, and Georgia. It's a really strange environment that we've developed here, at least with the on-field product. And I think this was a fear going into the end of the BCS era, that you had this homogeneity of who's competing for a national championship. We went to 4, and lo and behold, you're kind of looking at the same 3 or even 4 if you count Clemson as a bounce-back team. So everyone is chasing Bama at this point. I do think Ohio State's got just a fantastic shot to get back on top for the first time since 2014. But, obviously, if you're doing bet those 3 versus the field, I think it's a pretty safe bet that one of those 3, at this point, you would pick one of them over the rest of the field to claim the national championship.
Paul Myerberg is with us, USA Today College Football at Hail Varsity. I think you're right about Ohio State. They're not that far removed from playing for the title, and it didn't go well that day against Bama. But Ohio State needs to shore up their defensive line. That was an issue when it came to folks running on them last year. Based on your insight and looking at the Buckeyes, do you think Ohio State's prone to be better to figure out a way to stop the run? I know they'll be fantastic throwing the football. I know they'll have a guy to hand it off to, and Travion, and the receiving core is just going to reload. But defensively, can they be marketably better, or do they need to be that much better than last year?
Well, they definitely need to be better to go 15-0, 14-1, and that's kind of the fine line that we kind of referenced a moment ago. Ohio State's going to out-athlete 90% of their schedule. Schematically, you combine those things together, they should outclass 100% of their Big Ten schedule if all things go according to plan. But when you get into those semis and championship game, if you're not running at full tilt both sides of the ball, you're going to get overrun, as we saw 2 years ago when they played Bama. I do like the fact that you have a coach in Jim Knowles who came over from Oklahoma State who has a proven track record over his career of finding out ways to defend the run. I understand it's a different beast when you're in the Big 12 defending against, a more, I don't want to say finesse, but maybe a little bit of a less physical or traditional running game than you might see in the Big 12. But I do believe they're going to devote resources to winning on first down and letting their athletes on the edge and on the outside kind of win battles on 3rd and 7+. So I'm a big fan of Ohio State. This is not like hedging my bets at all. I think it's safe to say Ohio State's the class of the Big Ten. But yeah, I mean, if they're top 40 on defense, they're clearly a better team than last year. I don't know if they're a national championship team, but if they're a top 25 defense, they're getting off the field on 3rd down. I think they're very, very frightening. Because like you said, they lost 2 first-round receivers to the draft, and they're not going to miss a beat. They're just not. They're going to be the best offense in the Big Ten by a margin. So Ohio State is a beast. If you catch them on a good day, maybe you can pull off an upset if you're an underrated Big Ten team, but that's asking a lot. I think they are head and shoulders at this point ahead of the rest of the conference.
Paul Myerberg with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Paul, you said the top 3 is pretty unexpected, but I'd go as far as say the top 5 when you add in Clemson and Notre Dame. And Notre Dame's a team I want to focus on here for just a second. We've talked about them a lot, not for what's going on the field for Notre Dame, but off the field potential conference realignment. When you look at that Notre Dame squad this year, do you think they can keep it going even after losing their head coach and Brian Kelly?
It's interesting to think about. I mean, they do start off against the Buckeyes, and that's for better or worse. We tend to really focus on first impressions. We look back to a guy like Willie Taggart at Florida State as someone who really flopped to Virginia Tech in prime time on the day. He never recovered. Marcus Freeman is a different animal. It's a different program. He has a different sort of leash, but nonetheless, if it's 40-10 on week 1, that's a suspension that might last for a while. I think Notre Dame is a good football team. I have questions about their quarterback play. What I do like, however, is, believe it or not, I love the change in voice. Not that it got tired under Brian Kelly, because they had really kind of peaked these last couple of years, but sometimes a younger guy like Marcus Freeman, you've seen it in recruiting, you've seen it in their team energy when you do get a chance to see him. Sometimes that can really pay off, at least in the immediate sense. So Notre Dame, yeah, for sure. I think they've earned that number 5 spot. You could have put a few other teams there, but Notre Dame, I can't really argue with that. I think they're very, very, very good. I think they'll lose week 1, but clearly a team that can get to a New Year's 6 or maybe backdoor their way into the top 4 if they run the table from there.
Paul Myerberg with us, USA Today College Football at Paul Myerberg on Twitter. Paul, going to shift over to Nebraska, and 3-9 a year ago. You have wait and see in this state for a better season. You have an easier schedule to navigate. Scott Frost, you made changes, and we all think they may be for the better in a year, but you need to do something to see a second year with this staff. What's your take on the Huskers here for 2022?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it in the vacuum, guys, I do think you see a reason why you can have a little bit of optimism. Clearly, to me, the Scott Frost experiment of I want to run the offense but also run the program was a bad fit. I mean, I don't know if it's a bad fit for his personality, but certainly was a bad fit from an overarching, keep your finger in every single pie kind of approach. So I do like bringing in a veteran like Whipple. As much as any team in the country, I think they will see a really profound benefit from transfer portal and from maybe a few first-year recruits. Certainly that JUCO running back seems like a special guy. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we don't really live in a vacuum, as Nebraska fans know all too well. And the reality of the situation is this is not a program on an upward trajectory. It's a program that needs to prove itself every single day. And to be quite fair, 5 years in, I want to see them beat Northwestern 40-14. And then maybe we can talk about whether this team is for real. Because if you are for real, a Northwestern team that was just as bad as Nebraska last year, if not worse, with enormous question marks personnel-wise, almost across the board, Nebraska needs to take care of business that week. So let's talk on the 28th maybe. For right now, I'm not even cautiously optimistic. I'm a little bit pessimistic based on what we've seen. But I have to admit, it's August 15th. This is a team with potentially be an 8-win team. I think they finish up about 7-5, but clearly based off the schedule, as you mentioned, maybe 7-2 going into November, because I think that's possible. And if they're in that place in November, I might have the math wrong, 6-2 or 7-1. It could be a real breakthrough year, but no coach in the country, nobody in the country needs a breakthrough year more than Scott Frost, because we don't know what the metric is, because it's all kind of vague for what he needs to do to come back. But I don't know if 7-5 will do it. I think 9-3 definitely does it, but 7-5 will kind of leave him on maybe on the fence.
What do you think of Casey Thompson? You've seen a lot of college football. I know the guy had a mangled thumb, and he still was good enough to gut it out for 10 games against Texas. Does a healthy Casey Thompson jump the Nebraska offense?
Yeah, I think so. And look, like I'm like the rest of you guys. I didn't really know the severity of that injury until a couple of days ago. I think I read a story in one of your local papers about how bad that injury was. Nebraska's had a tough quarterback the last 4 years. Toughness alone is not going to get you to a Rose Bowl or get you to a conference championship game, but careful football, avoid turnovers and third down, keep the offense running. I think Casey Thompson can very well be an upgrade. And look, I think they've got 2 QBs on the roster who can play at a Power 5 level at a pretty high level on Thompson and Purdy. I mean, a lot of programs were sniffing around Purdy, and not just small-time guys. I think a lot of programs are interested in a guy with his eligibility. So I like the quarterback situation. I think the important thing for Casey Thompson is not so much, hey, do I get this offense? Do I understand the scheme? Can I move the stick? It's about, breaking into a locker room that had played with the same guy for 4 years, a veteran guy who played through injuries, had a lot of friends, had a lot of backers. So he's got to win that locker room. I honestly, I'm not educated enough to say that he has or hasn't. But to me, that's for any first-year quarterback who's kind of assigned a starting role, the day they step on campus, you got to win over your guys. So not to say that's going to stop Nebraska, but it'd be great to see him step on the field on August 27th and clearly have the command of that huddle, command of that locker room.
Paul, let's talk about August 27th for a second. What's your take on the game being in Dublin? What kind of national intrigue does this have? And I mean, we've been talking about it here locally for, feels like 6 months now. Just it's weird, but we're all pretty excited for it to have the Huskers on a national stage week 0 yet again. What's the national intrigue like for this game, and what kind of national pull does Nebraska have?
Yeah, I tried to go to this game. I pitched it in an email to my boss. I just got back a ha 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 response. So I think unfortunately, I'm not going to be in Dublin for this one. I would have loved to be there. The good news is, and maybe not great news for college football fans, but good news for Nebraska. It's not the best week 0 slate. We've had much better games in the past in those week 0 slots. So to me, it's no doubt the game of the day. It's in 12:30, whatever time it is in Dublin, like 5-6 hours later, whatever the time change is. It's the game of the day. It's a statement opportunity for Nebraska. At the same time, with opportunity comes the potential for chaos. If they lose 17-14 or up 14-0 in the fourth quarter, the floodgates will open, and it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be pretty for Scott Frost in this program. So it's a must-win game. I do think they're going to have the eyes of the country on them. So it's a great chance, if they really are a different team and they really believe they are, to show people that fact. And they should. If they get it done and they have their heads on straight, this is a 14 to 17 point win. I'm just not very high on Northwestern this year.
Paul Myerberg with us, college football insider, writer, USA Today at Paul Myerberg. Give him a follow. Great stuff year after year with college football. Paul, it was awesome. Get caught up again. We'll do this soon. And thanks for a few minutes today.
Yeah, for sure, guys. Talk to you soon.
All right, there he is, Paul Myerberg with us, USA Today. Good stuff on Nebraska. Paul's done a lot of work and coverage on Nebraska on a national scale. And he is always intrigued by the Big Red, and there's been enough coaching changes over the years. He's made it the point to get to Lincoln for a few games to check things out, but very fair, but very firm with the Nebraska question mark on a national scope. So, yeah, I mean, you see the line kind of creep up a little bit. I think it's up to 13 against Northwestern, and it could be, it should be. I sound like Harry Carey. It might be, it is, right? Where you see what's on the field, you see what talent you've accumulated on top of the portal, and there you go. But great point about winning the locker room with your quarterback. We'll talk about winning some votes in the AP poll. The AP Top 25 out. And some love for Nebraska. We'll tell you who gave it. Hail Varsity continues on Monday. We're presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Chime in 402-466-ESPN or email the show, Chris@HailVarsity.com.
Just try me. Try me.
Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. And be sure to stream us. You can do so ESPN Lincoln, Facebook, and ESPN Lincoln Twitter. Don't forget the podcast. Omaha, Lincoln, Kearney, Hastings, Grand Island, Columbus. Tell a friend who loves Nebraska football at Hail Varsity Radio. You can find us different ways: Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. And also on the Hail Varsity YouTube channel is there. Got some good news from our folks who handle all the podcast stuff. This is a humble brag, but very proud, Elijah. It's the power of your mustache.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But Hail Varsity top 40 in sports podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
That is sweet.
Trending up.
Trending up, and we will keep paying for. I'm joking. We will keep paying for your support. But no, that was cool news. Funny news. You've heard of the name Telly Savalas, Elijah? Google it real quick.
Yep. Is that Telly with a Y? Yes.
Telly Savalas, right? Dude from the 60s, 70s, 80s, more so 70s.
Kojak.
Kojak,
Yeah,
right?
Kojak.
Okay,
Kojak.
Kojak.
Yeah, just say Kojak.
You get Brandon Vogel in the right light with the right shades on. He can be the Kojak look. He's got his head turned. Well, Kojak's Telly Savalas's favorite take was, "Who loves you, baby?" That was Telly Savalas's phrase. "Who loves you, baby?" Well, how about Brett McMurphy loving some Nebraska football? So you heard Paul Myerberg tell us that, hey, how about Texas not even getting voted into the top 25 by the Associated Press, but getting a first place vote in a ranking somewhere in the teens. Texas was in the teens for the coaches. Brett McMurphy, the man who took down Urban, gave Nebraska a vote. Nebraska's just at the end of the others receiving votes, but one better than none. None of the coaches voted Nebraska in. And I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated as to the why. Do I think Nebraska could end up ranked? Absolutely. Am I sick off Kool-Aid? No.
Well, this is something we discussed on the show Friday a little bit, me and Connor, which is if Nebraska lives up to the expectations that are needed for Scott Frost to keep his job, which, I mean, we just heard Paul Myerberg say
7-5 or better window.
To get to that 7-5 mark, I think most Husker fans expect that you need to be 6-1. Oh, sorry, 6-2 or 7-1 headed into your Final Four. And if you're 6-2 or 7-1 through your first 8 games of the season, that's grounds for top 25.
Easy.
That's what I said. So it's like top 25, while it seems out there a little bit, in order for Nebraska to have the kind of successful season that we've been talking about, they'll save Scott Frost's job. You need to have a stint in the top 25 this season, or at least close. At least close, because you probably need to be 7-1 or 6-2 by the time you head into November.
Listen, you're going to have teams move in, and are you renting or are you buying? Right now, your top 25, this is what happens. Bill Connolly, a good story here. One of the top 6 teams will win the national title. 2 top 10 teams will finish unranked. Mm-hmm. See Iowa State last year. Okay, started out 8th in the country. Like Iowa State, but didn't live. Same with North Carolina, by the way. 2 unranked teams will finish in the top 10. Okay. And you're going to have 3 mid-majors finish ranked, although that some of those mid-majors are moving to greener pastures sooner rather than later. Cincinnati's not a mid-major. They're good. Good football program. BYU, very good football program. Boise, typically pretty good. Houston's there. Central Florida's been dynamite with Frost and those who followed Frost. It was a nice will. Uncle Archie left you. All right. I mean, they're pretty good. So that's how things are going to shake out. But as far as Nebraska, I think back to the why question, I think Brett McMurphy looks at last year, looks at the talent, looks at the situation of having to perform or pack, and says, you know what, I'm going to put some money on Nebraska. Oh, well, it's just one vote. I'm not going to get crushed for it. It's not like Sports Illustrated pre-clickbait throwing Oregon State on the cover as their preseason number 1, right? Not Miami, not Oklahoma, not Washington, Florida State or Florida, but Oregon State. Ken Simonton era. They may have gone bowling, but you get my point. I think Nebraska can be ranked. Absolutely. They're going to need to be going into October. But what happens then? Because October was not kind. Nebraska was ranked, feels 1,000 years ago, but they were ranked. They were 6th in the country going into Madison and lost a killer in overtime. Then what happened? You get absolutely annihilated on national TV Saturday night, ABC, Ohio State. Just demoralized. As a team that was still ranked 8th, even the pollsters said, okay, tough one in Madtown, great effort, good comeback, because it was teetering there 17-7. What happened? Then Ohio State just absolutely decapitates you. And you limp to the finish. Nebraska needs to do August 27th for sure. Quite frankly, take down Oklahoma. Easier said than done with all of what we started talking about, and that's the offensive line. Handle the teams you're supposed to beat because you're, air quote, more talented than, and then finish decently. I'm not asking you to win out in November. I'm not crazy. Not even asking you to go 500 in November. But you want to talk about taking the wind out of your sails and what was, all right, it's better than 3-9, but that would quickly shift to son of a beep. You're 0-4 in November. It's the Hawkeyes, it's the Gophers, it's Michigan. Who else am I missing? We're in Wisconsin. And that's just how the Big Ten rolls in November. And there's 3 teams in the West: Wisconsin, Iowa, and Minnesota. You got this round robin death march. Who's going to be able to stay healthy or win with backups and be the last man standing in the most rugged bar fights in bad weather and cold weather, where you got to slam the football forward for 3 yards in a cloud of ice and win a 17-14 ball game in horrible wind, typically. So that's it to me. A lot of story to tell this season for Nebraska football. And one guy who sells and writes stories for a living with Action Network, formerly of ESPN, Brett McMurphy, says, you know what? Put my name to it. I'm going to put Nebraska as a team that's in the top 25, says him. They're quite capable of doing it. Can they get into that neighborhood and stay, at least rent for a while? We'll wind down on Monday, hour 1, 15 minutes away from Charlie McBride at Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time this hour, we're streaming, and check us out, ESPN Lincoln, Facebook, ESPN Lincoln, Twitter. You can email the show, Chris at hailvarsity.com. Our old buddy Brett Cianca, Pick 6 previews. Only 10 teams have been ranked in the preseason AP poll each of the last 4 seasons. That's a number, right? Paul Myerberg earlier with his Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Oregon, Utah, Wisconsin. What top 10 team do you think falls out of the rankings?
Well, not Bama, that's for sure.
I don't think so either.
Good insight here from Brad Edwards on Twitter. This is Bama's 15th straight season reaching number 1 in the AP poll. The next longest streak for any program in history is 7 consecutive seasons, and any coach is 6 consecutive seasons reaching AP number 1 at least once. As for Bama and Nick Saban, 15 straight. So I think they're off the table. I think they'll be fine.
I'm going to dive in here and just ask the question if Notre Dame stays in the top 25.
I think so.
I ask this because they open at Ohio State. They're at North Carolina. North Carolina is looking for a bounce back. BYU rolls into your joint, just beats the hell out of their 30-year-olds. They are at Syracuse, don't care. Clemson rolls that way. Then they end with USC. Along the way, they got to squeeze in Navy.
I look at that schedule though, and I don't see worse.
I see 8 or 9.
Yeah, which I don't think is good enough to drop you from the AP poll unless you drop a couple straight. Unless you say you'll close the season, you lose to Clemson, you lose a shocker to Navy or something like that, and you finish season
which has happened.
USC. It's happened, but there's still just too much talent on that.
What about A&M here? A&M, here's their stretch. September at they host Miami. They host Arkansas. They're at the Pirate. Pirate beat them last year. Then they're at Bama. Then their hangover game is on the road at South Carolina. Then they host Ole Miss. Then they host Florida. Then they're at Auburn. And then they end hosting LSU as they squeeze in UMass. Miami, Arkansas, Mississippi State, Bama, South Carolina, Ole Miss, Florida, Auburn, LSU.
My candidates in the top 10 to fall out of the top 25. You just hit one of them, Texas A&M. That's a team full of underclassmen. They had an all right season last year. Going to be high expectations. Going to be tough for them to live up to those expectations, A. And B, it's just like if something goes wrong for a team full of freshmen, redshirt freshmen, sophomores, how are they going to react? And something tells me that with the expectations that are around that program right now, they're a big candidate to crumble. The other two in the top 10, I guess I'll say Oklahoma is one of them just because.
Do they unravel in Lincoln? New coach. Yeah, it's fair.
And then Baylor at 10.
Baylor's schedule, though, is, they just were in the Big 12 title game, right? So there's your top 10 that'll end up. Who do you think ends up finishing in the top 10? Who's the surprise team this year? Penn State's not ranked. Does Penn State put a run together?
How about Ole Miss? They're coming in at 21. But I can see them jumping all the way up. They hit the transfer portal very hard this offseason.
Sure.
I love Lane Kiffin.
I know you do.
I think he did well, and I think he's going to do well with the talent he's brought in. Ole Miss is a sleeper for me to give a run to some of those top SEC schools, maybe finish top 10 this year.
I think Wake Forest is on borrowed time with their quarterback Gonzo.
Mm-hmm.
Insight only you can hear on Hail Varsity. All-American quarterbacks done for the year. That team's in trouble. Coach McBride's on the way. Hour 2 with Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmidt_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmidt.
Back with you, Hour 2. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Coach Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Be sure to check the podcast out, Hail Varsity Radio Podcast, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. You miss part of the show, can hear the whole thing. Also on the YouTube channel, Hail Varsity YouTube channel. And then we will post some of our interview segments. Paul Myerberg, USA Today College Football. In Hour 1, we welcome in Mr. Blackshirt himself, Charlie McBride, with us Monday with Charlie. Coach, how was the weekend? How's the weather up north?
The weather's beautiful. The weekend's not too good. It was windy and overcast, and a lot of people can't, on the weekend, that's tough. A lot of people work all week and then hope they can bring their friends up and stuff like that. And it turns out to be lousy, so it's too bad. But we live here, so it's not any big deal.
Yeah, the visitors, you're like, hey, out of my control, right?
That's right.
Well, I'll tell you what, Charlie, we got some rain here in the capital city today. Much needed. My lawn, it was getting bad.
It's going from brown to a little lighter brown. Coach, it was supposed to be 105 and humid, but it was really pretty pleasant for. The golf wasn't pleasant, but the weather, they did the old okey doke. They said it was going to be hot and nasty, and it was pretty enjoyable.
Well, weathermen are basically liars. You don't like calling a person a liar, but sometimes they don't know for sure, so they just go ahead and throw it out there.
You're telling me there's a dartboard in back?
Yeah. I know. I knew one of them out in Arizona, and he used to laugh all the time because he said all I do is say it's going to be sunny and mild, and then all of a sudden in the summer it's going to be sunny and 115, and that was it. Yeah, and then they'd say something about the East or the Midwest or something, and usually California was burning down, and Oregon and what all.
Charlie McBride's with us. Coach, the alternate uniforms came out today, and I know that is probably not high on the give a crap meter for you. That said, it's a tribute to the 1983 Huskers, the scoring explosion. What do you remember about 83? And do you like the fact that team is having uniforms as a tribute to them?
I remember 83. Probably the best is going to the game, and some of the offensive players were reading the newspaper, and they have a new defensive coordinator, and he was telling people that they're going to see some things they've never seen before. And I'm sitting in the back. Sometimes they're right, but I didn't know this guy, and I still don't know who he is. I don't know how long he lasted, but we put about 80 points on him. I don't even remember, but it was one time their corner didn't even line up on Irving Fryer.
So this is the Minnesota game. This was the Minnesota game.
Yeah.
No, you guys.
That's what I remember. I remember that game, and the other thing was Ken Graber had asked them if he could walk on, and he's from Minnesota, and they said no. And he went to, I think, Iowa and a couple of schools, and then he came by us in the summertime, and we told him, of course. But he was also, I think, state heavyweight wrestling champion, and I just had no clue why these people. Here's a guy that, I can't believe they didn't offer him a scholarship or at least say he could walk on. Plus, he was a great student and ended up being, I think he's a civil engineer and so forth. And, it's just sad to see some of that stuff that people in their own state won't take care of their own kids.
Well, you guys went 84-13 against Minnesota. How did you talk to your guys? How did the team? How did Coach Osborne treat preseason rankings? Because I know that was the year Nebraska started number one. Your preseason number one had a lot of hype and pressure, and you deserved all of it because of right with the guys back. And the poll came out, and the rest at least one vote to be ranked, but just one. And how it's a different time 40 years ago, right? To now. But did you deal with the kids at all when it came to the preseason rankings?
Being number one is, I always thought, the kiss of death. And then besides that, Coach Devaney would always come by just, the week before the first game, and he'd always open the door and say, "Fellas, we're behind you, win or tie," and then close the door. and everybody would laugh at that, and then he'd close the door and everybody would throw up.
So he was serious. That's funny.
Yeah, well, he didn't. He did it in a different way, but he had his way of doing things, and we knew what he meant. Winner, we'll see you all later.
Charlie McBride's with us here on Hail Varsity Radio, and Coach, I got to ask the question with that 1983 team. With the benefit of hindsight,
you're not going to ask this.
What did you kick the extra point?
Oh, you mean no?
Okay.
No, you can't tie.
Well, you just said that you said the thing. Win or tie, we're behind you. So it led me to think. What did you kick the extra point?
and that was a deal that was decided. We talked about that during the week, and there wasn't. You say, well, what did you decide on the sideline? We decided before if it was tied, we're going for the win. Everybody. I mean, there wasn't a coach on the staff that didn't say, and I think our players felt the same way.
Would you have called the rollout pass? Let me ask you that.
Sure. I mean, it's, you got a good receiver and he's caught everything he's thrown and good quarterback. And I think when I'm not an offensive coach at the time, but there was not a possibility of a run by Turner. And so it was what, and I honestly think that that was what they're going to run if it got in that situation, because offensive people spend a lot of time in situations, and those kind of situations. Defense, if they score, you get fired. So what's the difference?
Coach McBride's with us.
You just let them have it as best you can.
I want to talk offensive line with you, Coach. And Coach Frost on Saturday was talking about just how hard the offensive lines were doubling their energy output, and they have technical GPS trackers that measure how much energy is being spent. And in the individual drills, the offensive line's really going to work. That's what Raiola's doing. And I'm interested to hear line what you can be this year. And just the word out of practice is that they'll got some growing to do, which is understandable, but you want it to start growing.
Yeah. Well, we didn't have all that technology. We just lined them up, and we knew our kids were, the kind of people we had. And I would think that's what he feels like. It's young people really realize. I think last year was good for them to go. I mean, you say it's good, it wasn't, but to go through something like that, and I think offensive linemen more than anybody realizes how much they have to improve, and because they're protecting the quarterback, it's the running game, it's what happens if the weather's terrible, but there's all kinds of things they get put in. For a defensive lineman, if the weather's terrible, that's a plus for them. And so, but the thing is these kids are, there's some pride. I mean, there's some guys that have spent a lot of time, working over the winter, and you have a new coach. I think that was a plus, and somebody that really has technique down, and probably a little more scientific than most of the old guys were. It was just grinding, in the old days.
If you're to put the coaching hat back on, and you're coaching for Northwestern, say, this season, and you've been hearing the reports out of Nebraska's fall camp, well, the offensive line might be the one weak spot along the offense. They've been looking shaky against Nebraska's front seven. How would you, as a defensive coordinator, try to game plan for that as part of Northwestern's game prep? How would you try to attack that offensive line and test them?
Well, the first thing I tell them is warn them about offensive line. Warn them what happened, that they have pride, and they didn't sit around all winter. And I try to scare them a little bit as the year goes on, and that them in the weight room, to understand what they're doing. I've said a couple of times that when you run a drill, we work harder, and I always put it this way: if you're stepping over a bag, you're stepping on somebody's face. and it isn't our team. Let's put it that way. So, mean what you're doing and make it fit, how you really feel. When you put your hand on the ground, I mean, I don't care who you are. You're going a million miles an hour. And it goes to practice too. And if you're not going to be that way, the other players are going to see it. And to me, that's the most devastating thing you can have is your own teammates telling you, get moving. Instead of, coach always will tell you to get moving, even if you're moving.
A little bit of prodding never hurt. Charlie McBride with us, a Monday with Charlie. Coach, about a little more than a week and a half or so, and it's Ireland time. You ready? Can you handle one more week?
Sure. No, I'm ready, and it's to me, when I'm sitting here, I'm probably as nervous as the kids' parents, and because I don't think a lot of the players realize, they're nervous, but I don't think any of them really realize what it's like to be a parent and sitting in the stands and how you feel about your son going out there in front of 90, 100,000 people and playing, because it's nerve-wracking. I know. I mean, I've talked to parents before, and they're basket cases, some of them. So it's, the game itself, I think when players realize, their responsibility to the team is one thing, and a lot of them don't think about whether their my mom and dad's are here, my grandmother's here, my, aunt's here and everything. They say that, but, that's sometimes just that they're there, not how nervous they are.
Charlie McBride's with us. Coach, enjoy your week. Hope the weather's good, and we'll talk to you next Monday. How's that sound?
That sounds good. I hope I can be with you.
So do we.
Well, it might snow here.
Oh, I get you. It might snow. I want that picture. I want to see the proof of that. Coach, you take care, all right? Thanks for the time.
Okay, guys. Thanks for having me. We'll see you next week.
All righty.
Bye now. There
he is, Mr. Blackshirt Charlie McBride. A Monday with Charlie. Always love getting caught up with him. He's a true gentleman, knows his football, and the Minnesota game. Yeah, that was funny to look at. 84-13. And the backups got tired, as Mike Babcock told me. So Nebraska had to put their starters back in when it's already 60-plus points. It wasn't running it up. The backups got tired. So there you have it. Funny story about John Madden and the horse that used to run around Kansas City when the Chiefs would score. John Madden came into halftime. Oakland's getting smoked. And John Madden just said, look, you're killing the horse. And around the stadium 15 times already in the first time. Make some of your calls and thoughts. Continue.
And we're back.
Fellas, think we could listen to the radio?
On Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Yes! That's awesome!
Open phones, you want to jump in till 6. Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery, fixing the offense. Topic we'll get into. One way to fix that is quarterback play and thoughts on Casey Thompson's thumb. Good story from the Journal Star and Amy Just. Charlie McBride, that podcast will be up on ESPN Lincoln on demand. And we'll have a snippet from there, too. 1983, we got into it because of the alternate uniform drop. They're honoring the scoring explosion. I think that's the first poster I had as a kid. Dad had one in the garage. I had one in my room. And the triplets, Fryer, Rozier, Gill. When I first started in radio, we had them all on at once. That was really cool. Don't know where that tape is. But they were incredible. Unfortunately, defense was a year away. I think Nebraska top 5 scoring defense in the country in 84. 83 didn't matter because you're scoring 60 a game.
Yeah, and I wasn't alive back then, but I guess that would make sense.
I was 5.
That makes sense why they called it the scoring explosion and not the well-rounded explosion.
Scoring explosion. So you have a question for the room, Elijah, with the alternate uniforms. You know what? My kid's not 5 anymore, so I don't have to buy a freaking New Jersey every year for him. Back when he cared about Nebraska football. So the alternate uniforms, at least they're not ugly like they were against Wisconsin or Illinois.
Oh, the whole Scrabble uniforms against Wisconsin.
Oh, the avoid the Noid uniforms from back in the day.
Or those ones against Illinois were good too. The ones way back when
when
Randy Gregory, when it was the wrong shade of red, and you also couldn't read any of the numbers or anything.
And when Randy killed an Illini player on a crackback block.
Maybe it's because of how bad the jerseys were, gave him some motivation, you know.
Whatever.
So they talk about the play.
Did you get into it or not? Was that a thing with you? You're way younger.
So I was middle school, yeah. I loved the alternate uniforms every single year. I was counting down the days every single fall, like, ooh, when are we going to get this alternate jersey released? And now I get older and I go, who the hell cares? Let's win some football games. And maybe I'd care more if the Husker football team was winning some football games. Maybe give me some more time to worry about alternate uniforms instead of the performance of the team. Now, I look at these and at least they're not as out there, not the ones where you look back on when you go, man, why the hell did we wear those? That's how I feel about most of the uniforms. And the exceptions to that rule were the 97 throwbacks that they wore against Wisconsin that one year. I really like those. And these are kind of in that same vein of they're not rocking the boat too much. They honor a team of old, but you're still going to look out there and you're still going to go, yeah, okay, that's Nebraska. I can tell because of the uniforms. I think that's important with the alternates. I want to look at them and go, okay, that's Nebraska. And we get that with these. The design of them, I'm not overwhelmed. I am not underwhelmed with them. I'm thoroughly whelmed. Just right down the middle. My only question, why are they releasing these on the 39th anniversary of the 1983 team? Like what, you couldn't wait a year and made it a clean 40?
I don't know. I don't have an answer for you, but
I assume they have something special planned for one of these games to come honor the team, but why 39 years later?
Well, and when do you wear them, right? Do you wear them against Oklahoma?
I don't think so.
Do you wear them against Indiana? Because I know they're going to be honoring the 40th anniversary team from 82 with Dave Remington and company. The all-white alternates. Interesting preview for Nebraska. The Associated Press is out with their Husker preview, as is Wisconsin. And this is the SB Nation Husker preview by Wisconsin. And they say there's a lot of shots taken at Nebraska in here. If they get beat, can just shout away. They're 7-2 against Iowa. They have not been great against Minnesota, but they've only lost once against Nebraska. So this is the preview by Bucky. And they say the best 3-9 team in college football is back and looking to bounce back in 2022. Get to your phone calls in a minute. This is the sentence that absolutely once if you're a Nebraska fan and you're sick of losing to Wisconsin and you maybe didn't have a good time in Madison initially, it's hard to not have probably a good time and have a beer or two in Madison. But if it's a treatment thing, it's hostile environment. Next up, we take a look at the Big Ten's failure project, Nebraska. Quite interesting. Who's on the horn here?
We got Pete on the line.
Pete, go ahead. Thanks for calling.
How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for listening. Go ahead.
I got a couple questions. You know, given our recruiting rankings, if you really look at the last 4 years, that's kind of been a failure. And the sad part of it is it's things that should have been fixed after year one. When you look at special teams, you look at turnovers, you look at end-of-game play. That has to change. And I'm a Scott Frost supporter.
Mm-hmm.
but I think this is the year things have to change. And on the alternate uniforms, what is our record when we wear an alternate uniform? I don't think it's a very good record.
Beat Northwestern that one year when
you
wore
beat
the whites.
Illinois.
You beat Illinois.
You beat Wisconsin. Your only win was against Wisconsin in the alternate uniforms. I think
you beat Illinois twice, actually, because you wore the weird throwbacks like the 1920s.
Okay,
so you got four wins and all the other ones are losses.
So what do we have? 4. Pete, thanks for calling. What do we say? 4 and 7?
That sounds about right, because you have losses to UCLA. It's going to be hard to count the
losses to Northwestern.
Northwestern.
A few times.
Against, who do you wear the blackout uniforms against a couple years back? Indiana? Lost to Indiana.
Yeah, that wasn't good.
And then, I'm forgetting another one in there, but it's sub 500. Pretty. I mean, well, do you count the Mike Riley whiteout uniforms and it was the normal uniforms with the white pants? Was that technically an alternate?
No, you had the white helmet. I mean, you had the white helmet, gray face.
I'm thinking
the matted white. That's one of I'm counting one of those.
Yeah, but do you count the one that's just like the surrender whites, where Nebraska wore their normal uniform,
their
uniforms, but with the white pants?
No, because I mean, if you go all white, like the 92 Iowa State look, yeah, that's not alternate uniforms. Just a bad decision. So.
It's a bad decision. Those all reds that people for some reason clamor for.
Dude.
The red tops with the red pants, those things are ugly.
Throw that 86 OU game on. Never again.
Terrible looking uniforms.
Never again. So, well, listen, Pete, your question here, recruiting rankings. Yeah, if you recruit in the top 25, like Nebraska has, don't disagree. Turnovers, absolutely killer for Nebraska. I mean, 48 turnovers by your quarterback during his career, interceptions and fumbles. Special teams, it's costing you 3-7 points a game in Big Ten play. End of game decisions. I don't know why you're in Smothers just history to throw the football in the shadow of his own goal line if he's not a guy you feel comfortable throwing the football with when he has to throw it. How many safeties you give up last year? 3?
Well, you started off hot against Illinois.
You did against Illinois. You did against Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
Then you had one against Iowa. So, yeah, end of game decisions. I mean, it comes down to a lot of that has been taken out of the head man's hands. So he can go observe.
And maybe
he can go direct.
And maybe you have more room for a safety if you're not missing 2 field goals a game and not allowing a punt return for a touchdown. And this is
statistically, you commit a safety, you lose in football.
Yeah, well, because it really ends up being closer to a either 5 or 9 point swing because
of those field position. And let's put a grand total of momentum being worth 3.5 a game.
Well, and then even if they don't score on that ensuing drive, which because of momentum, I think everyone expects the team who gets the safety to do it. They're at least going to pin you down inside your own 20 if they have a competent punter, which seems like everyone but Nebraska has. So, but you look back at last season and it's these little mistakes that you're talking about with the special teams, safeties, penalties along the offensive line, a poorly timed sack in the fourth quarter of a football game. Take those things away, and I think that's where the optimism from this Nebraska team comes from. The fact that you lost 9 games last season, but you lost them all very close and a lot of mistakes that feel like they should be fixable. Now, will those mistakes be fixed? The tenure of Scott Frost and his 4 years here would tell you no, they're not going to be fixed because they're mistakes that shouldn't have to be fixed after 4 years under a head man. But that's why there is the optimism with this team, because they felt like they had the talent last season to win 8 games, and it almost feels like there's a talent upgrade on this year's roster.
Mistakes are going to be fixed by different position coaches. Okay. O-line, we'll see. Running back, you're going to find 2 or 3 guys that will be ready to go. And from a special team standpoint, you have a coordinator. And you have a wide receivers coach that's not going to put up with any BS. That's where that excellence will be demanded by them. Period.
Mm-hmm.
So with Wisconsin's preview here, they have different preseason expectations. Listen, they can go either way, kind of like you. There's some optimism, there's some reality. 2021 and 2022 could be a lot alike. if Nebraska doesn't fix things. And it comes down to fixing mistakes, as you alluded to. You lost your final 6, so going into Ireland, Nebraska's on a 6-game losing streak. You have to be a lot better. And Nebraska was a better team than their record showed. But it really comes down to caring for the football and having a strong line play. I don't know if I can buy into strong line play. I agree you have to have it. I don't know that Nebraska will have it at some point in the year. A year from now, Nebraska could have strong line play. Are they ready now? Are you going to be good in the trenches defensively? And you've overhauled completely on special teams, which had to happen. If you just don't suck on special teams, that will probably give you a couple of ball games. So a bowl game is possible, says Bucky Badger, but so is 3-9. Right? I mean, you need to see real change before you buy in. Paul Myerberg said it. Bucky the Badger says it here in the 5th quarter preview. And I think you, as a Nebraska fan, you are so geared up for the start of football. Totally hear you. Totally get it. Same here. But you're going to be cautious even with a win against Northwestern. It's got to look a certain way to you. And it's beyond style points. We're talking competency. And that's, you as Nebraska fans know competency when you see it. More thoughts. We continue on Hail Varsity.
He's in his 30s, but sounds like he was born with a stogie in one hand and a brew in the other.
Now, say my name.
It's Schmitty on Hail Varsity Radio.
I got the body of a preteen Swedish boy.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. We'll have a Better Call Saul prediction tonight. Mike St. James tomorrow to recap the series finale tomorrow. Rick Kaczynski with this tomorrow, a Tuesday with Kaz. Going to get his take on some of the issues with the offensive line and maybe how quickly those fixes can happen. Mitch Sherman with this. And then excited Wednesday, we'll have all-time Husker fullback great Joel Makovica going to be with us. Need a little fullback here ahead of kickoff. And then Evan Bland going to join us from the World Herald. So excited about that this week. Numbers to get in at 466-3776, 466-3776, 800-825-5865. Can email chris@hailvarsity.com. We're streaming Facebook Live and ESPN Lincoln's Twitter, ESPN Lincoln's Facebook, ESPN Lincoln's Twitter. But can shout at us that way if you're bouncing around and give us some comments there. I'll always love show content suggestions, some more sports gambling suggestions in the mentions, so we'll put our heads together for that. Topic of fixing in Wisconsin's Nebraska preview, real change. Very thick with sarcasm and poking the bear type jokes about Nebraska, but some certain truth to where Nebraska's fallen short. Wisconsin can be hard to watch at quarterback. Wisconsin can have a bunch of dudes that block and really not catch the football. Occasionally, they'll throw it to Barry's grandson before he went to the NFL. Defensively, they'll sick 4 linebackers on you that you don't know where they're coming from, and they've got 2 dudes that like biscuits and gravy on the interior that just stop and stuff your run. And they've got some dudes that can cover a back end, and voila, Wisconsin's going to have some beast at an outside linebacker off the edge, and they're going to have a running back that's 240 that runs a 4.3. And they're going to have 5 fat guys lean on you for 4 quarters and then fall on you when you push you down. There is your formula to 9-3 in a West trip to Indianapolis. For Nebraska, quarterback can be a difference maker. It's going to be this year if Nebraska is to exceed your expectations or meet your expectations And Amy's story from the Journal Star. How grotesque is this if you're Casey Thompson and you have damage to both your ligaments, UCL and RCL? She had a chance to get a little bit more in depth with Casey on just what was wrong with his thumb. He had to go see a hand specialist in LA, Dr. Shin.
Really?
Yeah,
Dr. Shin?
Dr. Shin.
Dr. Shin's a hand specialist. Pick the wrong field.
Whatever you want to say. But Amy, in all her years covering the Saints, knows Drew Brees. Drew Brees had thumb issues the year he was hurt. Same with Russell Wilson. And Brees couldn't even grip the football, let alone throw it. Casey's playing last year with torn and damaged UCL and PCL ligaments. Jacked hand, couldn't grip the football, had to improvise. And yet Sark benches him after the Oklahoma game because of his inconsistency, his lack of accuracy. Can you imagine trying to play with a thumb so distraught that you need a surgical intervention?
Well, did you see the alleged photo?
10 of 12. I mean, it looks like you got hammer toes.
Did you see the alleged photo from last season whenever Casey, they got a picture of his hand post game and it looked like a balloon?
Oh, it's horrible.
It's grotesque.
I'm sorry to laugh, but I mean, it's like, dude, you're playing 10 games and you led the Big 12 in passing.
His hand was rounder than the ball.
I know. I mean, it just, God. And then you get benched at Texas. And if I'm Casey Thompson and the defense is giving up 50 a game, I'm scoring 48. I'm out of, I mean, no kidding, he's looking to get the hell out. It's, Sark. And he just wanted to keep playing and keep grinding. And I think right there, we listened to indoctrinating yourself to the locker room. What Paul Myerberg say in hour one? You gotta be the dude in that locker room. Is that something that's happening or going to happen for a new quarterback? You hope. You know where it's at yet. But as far as leading by example and gutting it out to go try and win, and Texas allowing it to happen or him camouflaging it well enough to keep the job, good on him. Whether it was for that starting job he'd worked his butt off to win or wanted to go try and ball for his teammates, whatever the motive is he was out there playing hurt and doing enough to win.
Well,
that's what you have as your quarterback right now when we talk about changing the offense, fixing the offense, and being different. Despite all of those issues with his thumb, he was far from a turnover machine.
I liked what Paul had to say back in hour one in terms of having the toughest quarterback in the Big Ten is not going to win you the Big Ten. Nebraska had a very tough quarterback last season as well, and Adrian Martinez, he played through half the season with a freaking broken jaw. And now, in terms of playing the quarterback position, a hand might be a little bit more important for throwing the ball than a jaw, but Adrian Martinez was a guy who still wasn't afraid to go run the football with a broken jaw. So Nebraska is going from one tough quarterback to the next year, and it's not going to come down to toughness in terms of can Casey Thompson do better than Adrian Martinez.
Win your locker room.
Yes.
That's where I'm going with it, and guys will want to play with you and for you. Now you have to avoid the crucial mistake. And that's really what it's up to along with line play.
I think I'd prefer, though, if Nebraska could make it through a whole season without a quarterback getting hurt because, there's a free rusher coming through on 2nd and 12 and he's getting lit up in the backfield or any of those things that could lead to a quarterback injury. I just much prefer if the quarterback does not touch the ground once all season.
Keep wishing. Keep wishing. Here's what the hope is if you're a Nebraska fan. Got an offensive coordinator that's going to just call plays and hand the ball off and go win that way. Doesn't have to be or look a certain way. There's a lot of different pages in that playbook that you can lean on that will let your best do their thing. Run to the left because those guys are run blockers. If that means not putting yourself in 3rd and 9 and not having extra protection off the edge for your tackles between a tight end and a running back. If it's just a 3-person route, good. But make the adjustment. Quick throws. 3-step and let it fly, right? Pretty hard to beat the hell out of somebody if it's 3 seconds or 3 steps and gone.
The key is a quarterback that can make quick decisions and is decisive.
I think Casey Thompson can be quick and decisive. And then once in a while, go deep to Washington or Palmer, right? We'll wind down a Monday. You're invited to check out the podcast, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. Subscribe to it. Give us a rating, good, bad, ugly. We love the feedback. Also, YouTube channel with Hail Varsity. You can see the video portion.
Miss us?
Come here, brother. Give me a hug. Bring it in for the real thing.
We're all for you. Catch the podcast at hailvarsity.com, the ESPN Lincoln app. Download them on iTunes.
Settle up, partner.
Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time, Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Find us on Twitter at Schmidt_radio or at Herbel. Follow the radio Twitter handle at Radio, and the parent Twitter handle at Hail Varsity. Got a email in from our dear friend Vic in Denver. Vic sent a photo of it is a photo of white whiskey.
Oh,
I bought a case of this. I'll save a bottle for you for your annual bonus. And Vic also says they've got to be crop tops for them to be throwback 83s. We said that because the jerseys were, I don't know, those guys were fit in 83. Well, I think they're fit now.
well, my question here, white whiskey.
Never tried it.
Isn't that just like moonshine? Like official moonshine?
It's called White Lightning. I took a shot of White Lightning in South Dakota, and I woke up a week later.
Well, isn't it made like using the same ingredients? The only difference is that whiskey is finished in the barrels. That's what gives it the brown color. I could be wrong here I'm no whiskey expert. I like whiskey, but I'm no expert. But I think that'd be a pretty similar type thing. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe someone needs to chime in and correct me here, but
You're just looking for free whiskey.
maybe I need to sample these two different things side by side and see what the real difference is on my palate.
Why don't we just get you handled? Have you take a shot on air in front of the camera, in front of everybody. See how your reaction is. It's okay.
Might as well make it 2 or 3 if we're testing different, the white whiskey versus the dark whiskey versus the moonshine. We'll do it right to lead off the show and see where things go.
Well, and I'll do the whiskey that doesn't hurt. Templeton that Vic brought me. I've manned up recently. I'm trying to be more like my late father. I love him, miss him during football season. But the look I got whenever I'd ask for like 7-Up or Sprite with the whiskey, I can't say what he thought of me. Just drink it with ice and water. Love you, Dad. Sure. Don't have enough hair on my chest to do that.
Just add more ice and more water.
Oh, you got to let it permeate and melt. Okay.
Yeah.
Reminder to buckle up. This is a hard transition from boozing to not getting in that vehicle after you're keyed up. So listen to this from the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office. Hands on the wheel, eyes and minds straight ahead. The driver has one job. That's to drive. A message from the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office. This is my call. I'm calling my shot. Better call Saul tonight. I think Kim rats out Saul. And I think Saul dies trying to escape.
That was my question to you is, can you set a total and an over-under on how many deaths there are in tonight's episode?
Just one.
Just one. Okay.
Walt died. Jesse survived. Kim is alive. And I think Saul is done.
Okay.
Check the podcast out. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Talk to you tomorrow at 4 on Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.